Chapter 1. The Offer Alexis. Chen sat in the waiting room of Dante Enterprises, trying not to fidget with her portfolio. The skyscraper headquarters of one of New York's most successful investment firms was intimidating enough. Knowing who owned it made her palms sweat: Dante Russo, billionaire, philanthropist, and, if the rumors were true, the head of one of the city's most powerful crime families. At 26, Alexis was a financial analyst trying to make partner at a mid-tier firm. She was good at her job, brilliant with numbers, able to spot patterns others missed. Which is why she'd been headhunted for this position. Dante Enterprises needed someone to audit their portfolio, find inefficiencies, maximize returns. The salary they'd offered was obscene. 3 times what she currently made, plus bonuses that could set her up for life. It was the opportunity of a lifetime. It was also probably illegal. Ms. Chen, a woman in an expensive suit, appeared. "Mr. Russo will see you now." Alexis followed her through glass doors into a corner office that screamed power and money. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Manhattan. Modern art that probably cost more than her apartment hung on the walls. And behind a massive desk sat Dante Russo. He was younger than she expected, 35 at most. Devastatingly handsome in a sharp black suit, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to calculate the value of everything they saw. When he looked up at her, Alexis felt pinned by his gaze. "Ms. Chen, thank you for coming." His voice was smooth, cultured, with just a hint of the Brooklyn streets he'd supposedly grown up on. "Please sit." She sat, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. "Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Russo. Call me Dante. I've reviewed your work. You're impressive. Young, but impressive. Your analysis of the Techford merger last year was particularly insightful. You read that?" "I read everything about people I'm considering hiring." He leaned back in his chair. "I need someone who can look at my portfolio with fresh eyes. Someone who's smart enough to spot problems, but discreet enough to keep what they learn confidential." "Confidential," Alexis repeated carefully. "Mr. Russo, Dante, I need to ask. There are rumors about your family, about where your initial capital came from. If I take this job, am I going to find evidence of illegal activity?" Most people would have been offended by the question. Dante smiled. "Direct, I like that. Here's my answer. Dante Enterprises is completely legitimate. Every dollar we invest, every property we own, every business we operate, all legal, all taxed, all documented. My lawyers ensure it." "That's not actually an answer." "No, it's not." He stood and moved to the windows, hands in his pockets. "My grandfather was Carlo Russo. You've probably heard of him. He built an empire the old way. Gambling, protection, smuggling, traditional organized crime. When my father took over, he started transitioning some operations to legitimate business. When I inherited at 25, I made a choice. I would finish the transition completely." He turned to face her. "It took me 10 years, but I did it. I shut down every illegal operation, invested everything in legitimate ventures, built this company from the ground up using legal means. Yes, the initial capital came from criminal sources, but every dollar I've made in the last decade is clean." "Why?" Alexis asked. "Why give up that kind of power?" "Because I got tired of looking over my shoulder. Tired of wondering if the FBI was listening. Tired of attending funerals for men who died over territory and pride." His expression hardened. "And because I wanted to prove I could build something that lasted without blood and threats. That I could be more than my grandfather's legacy." Alexis studied him, her analyst brain working. "You're telling me this because you need me to understand what I might find. Old connections, laundered money, transactions that look suspicious but are actually clean." "Exactly. If you take this job, you'll see things that raise questions. You'll need to trust that I'm telling you the truth. That while my past is complicated, my present is legitimate." He returned to his desk. "I'm offering you $300,000 a year plus performance bonuses. In exchange, you'll work exclusively for Dante Enterprises, report directly to me, and maintain absolute confidentiality about everything you learn. That's a lot of money for a financial analyst. You're not just an analyst. You're my insurance policy. Proof that my books are clean, that everything I say about going legitimate is true." He slid a contract across the desk. "Take the weekend. Review this. Do your research on me. I encourage it. If you decide you can live with my past while helping me build my future, come back Monday and we'll start. Alexis took the contract, her mind racing. It was risky. Even if everything he said was true, working for someone with his history could damage her career. But the opportunity was incredible, and something about Dante Russo's intensity made her want to believe him. I'll read this carefully, she said, standing. I'd expect nothing less. He walked her to the door. Ms. Chen, one more thing. If you take this job, there will be people who assume you're my mistress, that the only reason a young woman works this closely with me is because we're sleeping together. Alexis bristled. I'm a professional, I know, but in my world people think in certain ways. I wanted you aware before you decide. His expression was unreadable. For the record, I don't mix business with pleasure. If you work for me, our relationship will be strictly professional. I need your brain, not your body. It should have been reassuring. Instead, Alexis felt a strange flicker of disappointment, which was ridiculous. She barely knew this man. Good to know, she said coolly. I'll see you Monday. Or you won't. Either way, I respect your decision. Chapter 2. Into the deep end. Alexis accepted the job. She spent the weekend researching Dante Russo and found exactly what he'd described. A complicated past, transitioning to a legitimate present. Articles about his grandfather's criminal empire, stories about his father's attempts at going legal, and recent pieces about Dante himself, painting him as a reformed bad boy who'd turned his family's blood money into a billion-dollar business empire. Her first week at Dante Enterprises was overwhelming. She had access to everything: bank statements, investment portfolios, property holdings, business partnerships. And the more she dug, the more impressed she became. Dante hadn't just cleaned up his family's money. He'd multiplied it exponentially through smart investments, strategic partnerships, and an uncanny ability to spot opportunities. He owned real estate across 3 countries, had major stakes in tech companies, invested in everything from restaurants to renewable energy, and it was all clean. Meticulously, almost obsessively documented and legal. Find anything interesting? Dante's voice made her jump. He'd appeared in her office doorway, jacket off, sleeves rolled up. You gave $1 million to an inner-city youth program last month. That's not in any budget. Personal donation. I grew up in those streets. Some of those kids are where I was at their age. If I can keep even one of them from making the mistakes I did, it's worth it. Alexis looked at him with new eyes. You really are trying to make up for the past, aren't you? Every day. He entered her office, closing the door. Which is why I need to tell you something. There's going to be a situation this week that might concern you. What kind of situation? The Moretti family, they're old rivals of the Russos. They've been trying to muscle in on some of my legitimate businesses. Intimidation tactics, trying to force me to sell at a loss. Tomorrow, I'm meeting with their representative to resolve the situation. Resolve how? Legally, I'm offering to buy them out of the competing business at a fair price. If they refuse, I'll outcompete them until they have to sell anyway. No violence, no threats, just capitalism. He met her gaze. But the meeting might look suspicious. Men in suits, tense conversations. I wanted you to know in advance so you don't think I'm lying about going legitimate. Why tell me this? Because I need you to trust me. And trust requires transparency. He moved toward the door, then paused. Also because you're brilliant and I value your opinion. What do you think I should offer them? For the next hour, they went over the numbers together. Alexis found herself impressed by Dante's business acumen. He wasn't just a criminal who got lucky. He understood markets, risk assessment, long-term strategy. He thought like a legitimate businessman because he'd worked hard to become one. Offer them 20% above market value, she finally advised. It's generous enough to make them feel like winners, but not so much that it looks like you're desperate. Smart. Dante smiled, and it transformed his usually serious face. This is why I hired you. The meeting the next day went exactly as Dante predicted. Tense but professional. The Moretti representative accepted the offer, and just like that, a potential gang war became a business transaction. Alexis watched from her office as the men left, and realized something unsettling. She was starting to admire Dante Russo. Not just his business skills, but his determination to be better than his legacy. His refusal to take the easy, violent path. his genuine desire to prove he could succeed without crime. She was also starting to find him incredibly attractive, which was a problem. He'd been clear about keeping things professional, and she had no intention of becoming another cliché, the employee who falls for her powerful boss. But as weeks turned into months, working closely with Dante made it harder to maintain distance. He was brilliant, driven, and surprisingly funny when he relaxed. He worked 18-hour days, never asked her to do anything he wouldn't do himself, and treated her like an equal partner rather than a subordinate. And sometimes, when they worked late reviewing contracts or analyzing deals, she'd catch him looking at her, not with lust but with something deeper, like he was trying to figure her out, the same way she was trying to figure him out. 3 months into her employment, everything changed. Chapter 3. Breaking point. Alexis was working late, alone in the office when she found it. A transaction buried in old files from 6 years ago, a large payment to an offshore account, routed through multiple shell companies, the kind of thing that screamed money laundering. Her hands shook as she traced the money trail. It led back to a property sale, a warehouse that had supposedly sold for $10 million. But when she looked at comparable properties, it should have sold for maybe $2 million. The extra $8 million had been laundered through the sale. This was exactly what Dante had said she wouldn't find, proof that he'd lied about going completely legitimate. She was still staring at the documents when Dante walked in. He took one look at her face, then at her screen, and his expression closed off. "You found it. You lied to me." Alexis stood, anger and disappointment warring inside her. "You said everything was clean, that all your money was legitimate now. But this is from 6 years ago, before I finished the transition." He moved into the room, not defensive, just tired. "I should have told you it was there. I was hoping you wouldn't dig back that far. So it's real. You were still laundering money 6 years ago?" "Yes, that warehouse sale was one of the last illegal transactions I made. I was shutting down my grandfather's old operations, and I needed to clean the final assets before investing them legitimately." He sat down heavily. "Everything after that transaction is completely legal. But you're right to be angry. I should have been upfront about the timeline." Alexis paced, her analyst brain warring with her emotions. "Do you know what position this puts me in? If the SEC ever audits you and finds this and discovers I knew about it, I could lose my license. Go to jail. The statute of limitations has passed. That transaction is old enough that it can't be prosecuted, and it's buried deep enough that no routine audit would find it. You found it because you're exceptional at your job." He looked at her. "But you're right. You shouldn't have discovered this without warning. I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't change what this is." "No, it doesn't." He stood. "So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write you a check for 3 months severance. You can walk away right now, no questions asked, no hard feelings. Or you can stay, with full knowledge of what my past really looks like, and help me ensure my future stays clean." "Why would I stay?" "Because despite this one transaction, everything I told you was true. I have gone legitimate. I'm building something that matters, something that helps people, and I need someone I can trust to help me protect it." He moved closer. "But more than that, I think you believe in what I'm trying to do. These last 3 months, you've seen how hard I work to be better than what I came from. One transaction from 6 years ago doesn't change that." Alexis wanted to leave. The smart, safe choice was to take the severance and run, but he was right. She'd seen his dedication, his determination to build something legitimate. One mistake from his past didn't erase all of that. "I need time to think," she said finally. "Take all the time you need." "But Alexis?" He waited until she looked at him. "Whatever you decide, thank you. For caring enough to be angry. For holding me to a higher standard. That's exactly why I hired you." She went home that night planning to quit. She even wrote the resignation email. But she didn't send it. Because as much as the transaction bothered her, walking away from Dante bothered her more. The next morning, she walked into his office before he'd even arrived. He came in an hour later to find her already working. "You stayed." "I stayed. With conditions." She handed him a document. "This is a compliance agreement. From now on, any transaction over $1 million gets reviewed by an outside auditor. Every quarter, a third party audits the books. And if I ever find anything remotely suspicious, I have permission to report it without retaliation. Dante read the document and signed it without hesitation. Done. Thank you for staying. Don't thank me yet. I'm going to be watching everything you do 10 times harder now. Good. He smiled. I'd expect nothing less. Something shifted between them after that. The professional distance they'd maintained started crumbling. They spent even more time together, working late, grabbing dinner at his desk, talking about everything from business strategy to personal philosophy. Alexis learned that Dante was alone in ways that had nothing to do with being single. His parents were dead. His grandfather's old associates either feared him or hated him for going legitimate. He had employees and business partners, but no real friends. No one he could trust completely. That's why you hired me, she realized one night over Chinese takeout in his office. Not just for my skills, but because I'm outside your world. I have no loyalty to the old ways, no connection to your past. I can be objective. Partially, he admitted, but also because you're brilliant and I genuinely enjoy working with you. He set down his chopsticks. Can I ask you something personal? I guess. Why finance? You could have done anything. You're smart enough for medicine, law, anything. Why did you choose to work with numbers? Because numbers don't lie. People do, situations change, but numbers are honest. If you understand them, they tell you the truth about everything. She smiled. My parents immigrated from China when I was 2. They worked themselves to exhaustion running a restaurant. I watched them struggle because they didn't understand the financial system, didn't know how to make their money work for them. I decided I'd never be that vulnerable. I'd master the numbers so no one could take advantage of me. So we both chose our careers as armor. Me to escape my grandfather's shadow, you to protect yourself from vulnerability. I guess we did. Dante was quiet for a moment. I'm glad you stayed, Alexis. Not just because you're good at your job, but because you're one of the few people who sees me as I am now. Not what I used to be. What are you now? I'm still figuring that out. But it's easier with you here. The moment hung between them, charged with something neither wanted to acknowledge. Then Alexis cleared her throat and returned to the spreadsheet they'd been reviewing, and the moment passed. But they both felt it. The growing connection that had nothing to do with business, and everything to do with two people who understood each other's ambitions. Fears and determination to be more than their circumstances suggested they could be. Chapter 4. Dangerous territory 6 months into her employment. Alexis had become indispensable to Dante Enterprises. But she'd also become something more dangerous. Important to Dante personally. She noticed it in small ways. How he sought her opinion on decisions that had nothing to do with finance. How he remembered she preferred tea to coffee, and always had her favorite blend stocked. How his expression softened when she walked into a room. She noticed because she was doing the same things. Learning his schedule so she could anticipate his needs. Staying late not because work required it, but because she didn't want to leave. Finding excuses to touch his hand when reviewing documents. They were crossing lines without actually crossing them. Living in a gray area that was becoming increasingly difficult to navigate. The situation exploded on a Thursday evening. They were at a business dinner with potential investors when one of the men, drunk and aggressive, made an inappropriate comment about Alexis being Dante's beautiful assistant. Ms. Chen is my chief financial officer, not my assistant, Dante said coldly. And your comment was disrespectful. Apologize. The man laughed. Come on, Russo. Everyone knows why a guy like you keeps a girl like her around. And it's not for her spreadsheet skills. Dante stood so fast his chair toppled. Apologize, now. The entire restaurant fell silent. Alexis saw something dangerous flash in Dante's eyes. A glimpse of the man he used to be, the one who'd solved problems with violence. Dante. She put a hand on his arm. He's not worth it. But Dante wasn't listening. He grabbed the man's collar and spoke quietly enough that only their table could hear. You have 10 seconds to apologize to Ms. Chen, or I will make you regret every word you've ever spoken. The threat in his voice was real, and the investor paled. I'm sorry, Ms. Chen, I was out of line. Dante released him and threw money on the table. This meeting is over. My lawyers will be in touch about why we won't be investing with you. He offered his arm to Alexis. Let's go. In the car, Alexis could see Dante fighting to control his anger. His hands were shaking slightly, jaw clenched. You can't do that, she said quietly. He disrespected you. And you almost assaulted him. Dante, you're trying to be legitimate. That means handling things legally, not with threats. He called you... Dante stopped, took a breath. You're right. I overreacted. But Alexis, when he implied you were just... that we were... I couldn't let it stand. Why not? People have been assuming we're sleeping together for months. You warned me that would happen. Because those people don't matter. But hearing him say it, reducing everything you are to some cheap assumption, He looked at her. I reacted without thinking. Why? Alexis asked, though she thought she knew the answer. Because somewhere along the way, you stopped being just my CFO. You became someone I care about. Someone important. He ran a hand through his hair. Which is a problem, because I meant what I said about not mixing business with pleasure. You work for me. Getting involved would be inappropriate. So we just ignore this? Yes. Because the alternative is either you quit, or we cross a line that could complicate everything we've built. He looked out the window. I won't risk your career or your reputation because I can't maintain professional boundaries. They rode in silence back to the office. When they arrived, Alexis didn't get out of the car immediately. What if I quit? Dante turned to her, surprise in his eyes. What? If the only thing stopping this is that I work for you, what if I didn't? What if I gave my notice, stayed the appropriate time to transition my responsibilities, and then we revisited this conversation? I can't ask you to give up a job you love. You're not asking. I'm offering. She met his gaze. Because you're right. Somewhere along the way, this stopped being just business for me too. And I'm tired of pretending otherwise. Alexis, I'm not saying we have to do anything about it right now. I'm just saying that maybe after an appropriate time we could see if this is something worth exploring. She smiled. You built a legitimate empire to prove you could be more than your past. Let me make my own choice about my future. Dante was silent for a long moment. Then he reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering. You're extraordinary. You know that? I've been told I'm above average. He laughed, the tension breaking. All right. Put in your notice. We'll do this properly. Transition period, professional boundaries, all of it. And after you're no longer my employee, if you still want to explore this, we will. Deal. But Alexis, I need you to be sure. Once we cross that line, there's no going back. And my life, even legitimately, comes with complications. People will judge you for being with me. Your reputation might suffer. I'm a grown woman who can make her own choices. Let me worry about my reputation. She opened the car door. Besides, I've spent 6 months watching you build something incredible while fighting your past every day. If I can't admire that, what's the point of anything? Chapter 5. The transitional exis submitted her resignation the next day with a 2-month notice period. Dante, to his credit, was professionally distant. He approved the notice, began recruiting her replacement, and maintained appropriate boundaries. It was torture. They'd gotten used to working closely, finishing each other's thoughts, reading each other's moods. Now they were formal, careful, painfully polite. The office noticed. Rumors started that they'd had a falling out. They think I fired you, Dante mentioned one day, reviewing her transition notes. Let them think whatever they want. 2 more weeks and it won't matter. About that. He closed the document. I have a business trip next week. Tokyo. Meeting with potential partners for a new tech investment. I need someone who understands our portfolio to accompany me. Technically, you're still employed for another week. Technically, it would be completely professional. Separate hotel rooms, strictly business. Of course, they both knew it was a terrible idea. They also both knew they were going to Tokyo together. The flight was 13 hours of carefully maintained distance. Business class seats separated by an armrest that might as well have been a wall. They reviewed documents, discussed strategy, and pretended the tension between them didn't exist. In Tokyo, they maintained the facade. Separate rooms, professional meetings, business dinners. But on the 3rd night, after a successful negotiation, they found themselves alone in a hotel bar. This is killing me, Dante admitted after his 2nd whiskey. Me too. 3 more days until you're officially not my employee. 72 hours, he laughed. You're counting. Of course I'm counting. Alexis set down her wine. Dante, can I ask you something? When you decided to go legitimate, to leave the criminal world behind, did you know it would work? Or did you just have faith? Neither. I was terrified it would fail and I'd lose everything. But I knew if I didn't try, I'd spend my whole life trapped by my grandfather's choices. Sometimes the risk of failure is less scary than the certainty of staying where you are. Is that how you feel about this? About us? He reached across the table and took her hand. It was the first time they'd touched in weeks, and electricity shot through both of them. Yes, I'm terrified this could ruin everything. Your career, our working relationship, the respect we've built. But the alternative is spending the rest of my life wondering what if, and I can't do that anymore. Then stop counting the hours and just be here with me now. They left the bar together, and when Dante walked her to her room, they both knew what was about to happen. The professional boundaries they'd maintained for months were about to shatter completely. Are you sure? Dante asked, his hand on her door. I've never been more sure of anything. He kissed her then, and it was everything they'd been holding back for months. Passion and need and something deeper. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against hers. I need you to know something. This isn't just physical for me. These months working with you, getting to know you, watching you challenge me and push me to be better. I've fallen for you, Alexis. Completely. Good, she whispered. Because I fell for you months ago. I just didn't want to admit it. They spent the night together, and it was both exactly what they'd imagined and nothing like they'd expected. There was passion, yes, but also tenderness, vulnerability. Two people who'd spent their lives building armor finally letting someone see past it. The next morning, wrapped in hotel sheets, Dante traced patterns on her shoulder. I should tell you something. About my world. About what being with me really means. I know about your past, Dante. Not all of it. There are people who still see me as Carlo Russo's grandson, who think I'm weak for going legitimate, or who want to pull me back into the old ways. Being with me puts a target on you. I can handle it. I know you can. But I need you to understand what you're signing up for. My life is complicated in ways that have nothing to do with business. Alexis sat up, pulling the sheet around her. Then tell me, all of it. No more secrets. No more protecting me from the truth. If we're doing this, I need to know everything. So Dante told her about the enemies he'd made transitioning out of crime, about the old associates who still came to him for favors he no longer granted, about the constant balancing act of maintaining legitimate business while managing his family's legacy. There's one more thing, he said finally. My cousin Marco. He's been challenging my leadership. He thinks I'm destroying the family name by going legitimate. He's been trying to undermine my businesses, turn people against me. He's dangerous and he won't like that you're important to me. Then we deal with him, together. Alexis took his hand. Dante, I'm not afraid of your past or your complicated present. What I am afraid of is living a safe, boring life where I never take risks. You took a risk going legitimate. I'm taking a risk choosing you. Let's see where it leads. Chapter 6. The attack, they returned from Tokyo as a couple, no longer hiding their relationship. Alexis officially stopped working for Dante, though she remained a consultant for his company. The transition to her replacement went smoothly, and for a few weeks, everything seemed perfect. Then Marco made his move. It started with articles in financial journals questioning Dante's business practices. Anonymous tips to regulatory agencies about possible improprieties. Nothing concrete. Nothing that would stick, but enough to create doubt and damage reputation. He's trying to force you to fight dirty, Alexis said, reviewing the latest article. If you respond with your old methods, you prove him right, that you're still a criminal. If you do nothing, he damages your reputation. So what do I do? You prove you're smarter than him. You beat him at the legitimate game so thoroughly that everyone sees him for what he is, a dinosaur clinging to old ways. They built a strategy together. For every accusation Marco made, Dante had documentation proving the opposite. He invited auditors to examine his books. He increased his charitable giving, making his positive impact on the community impossible to ignore. He turned Marco's attack into an opportunity to prove once and for all that he was legitimate. But Marco wasn't finished. When financial attacks didn't work, he went personal. Alexis was leaving her apartment one evening when two men approached. She knew immediately they weren't random muggers. They were professionals. Marco sends a message, one said. Stay away from Dante Russo, or next time we won't be so polite. They didn't hurt her, just scared her. But it was enough. She called Dante, shaking, and within 15 minutes, he'd arrived with security. Pack a bag, he said, checking her apartment for bugs or cameras. You're staying at my place until this is handled. Dante, I'm not running. This isn't running. This is strategy. Marco wants to use you to get to me. I won't give him that opportunity. His expression was harder than she'd ever seen it. And tomorrow I'm ending this. How? The way I should have months ago, by cutting him out completely. The next day, Dante called a meeting of the family's legitimate business interests, all the companies and properties that fell under the Russo name. With Alexis's financial analysis backing him up, he presented evidence of Marco's attempts to sabotage the businesses, damage the family reputation, and undermine legitimate operations. You have a choice, Dante told the assembled board. You can support Marco's vision of returning to criminal operations with all the risks that entails. Or you can support my vision of building legitimate, lasting wealth. But you can't have both. Today you choose. It wasn't even close. The legitimate businesses Dante had built generated more money with less risk than the old criminal operations ever had. The board voted unanimously to follow Dante's leadership and remove Marco from any position of authority. Marco, faced with losing everything, made one last desperate play. He showed up at Dante's building with armed men, demanding a meeting. Dante met him in the lobby, unarmed, with only Alexis beside him. This is what you've become? Marco spit. Hiding behind lawyers and accountants instead of taking what's yours with strength? This is what strength looks like now, Dante replied calmly. Building things that last. Creating wealth that doesn't depend on violence. You see it as weakness. I see it as evolution. Our grandfather would be ashamed. Our grandfather died alone, paranoid, with more enemies than friends. I won't end up like that. Dante gestured to the building around them. This empire will outlast both of us. The old way dies with your generation. The new way builds something permanent. Marco looked at Alexis. This is her influence. She's made you soft. She's made me better. There's a difference. Dante stepped forward. You have 24 hours to leave the city. I'm being generous because you're family. But if I see you again, if you ever threaten her or anyone I care about again, I will use every legal resource I have to destroy you. And Marco? I have a lot more resources now than grandfather ever did. Marco left, and they never saw him again. Alexis heard he moved to Florida, tried to restart some small-time operations, and eventually ended up in federal prison for tax evasion. The old ways really were dying, and Dante was building something new in their place. Chapter 7. Building Empire 2. Years after they met, Dante and Alexis stood in the conference room of Chen Enterprises, the new name for their merged business interests. Alexis had started her own consulting firm, partnered with Dante on major investments, and together they'd built something neither could have created alone. The tech fund is up 40%, Alexis reported to their board. Real estate portfolio is performing above projections, and the charitable foundation has distributed $15 million to youth programs this quarter. After the meeting, they retreated to their shared office, a space that reflected both their aesthetics, both their values. We make a good team, Dante said, pulling her close. We make a great team. She smiled. Who would have thought? The reformed mob boss and the financial analyst. I'm technically a legitimate billionaire now. Reformed is such an ugly word. You're my reformed mobster billionaire, she teased. And I wouldn't have you any other way. He grew serious. Do you ever regret it? Walking away from that first job, taking a chance on me? Never. Best decision I ever made. She looked out at the Manhattan skyline. We built this, Dante. Something real and lasting. Something that helps people. We're not done yet. He pulled a box from his desk drawer. I have a question for you. Alexis's heart stopped as he opened the box, revealing a stunning ring. Dante, I know we do everything backwards. Started as colleagues, became lovers, built an empire together. But I want to do this one thing the traditional way. He took her hand. Alexis Chen, you've made me believe in futures I never thought I could have. You've stood beside me while I fought my past and built something legitimate. You've never flinched from the complicated parts of my life. Will you marry me? Tears streamed down Alexis's face. Yes, absolutely yes. He slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her. And in that moment, surrounded by the empire they'd built together, both of them felt something they'd spent their lives chasing. Peace. Purpose. Home. Chapter 8. Legacy The. Wedding was small and elegant, a far cry from the mob weddings of Dante's grandfather's era. Just close friends, a few business associates who'd become genuine friends, and Alexis's parents, who'd been skeptical of Dante at first, but had grown to love him. "You've made our daughter happy," Alexis's mother said at the reception. "That's all that matters." "She's made me into someone worth being," Dante replied. "I'm the lucky one." Their honeymoon was 3 weeks in Italy, seeing the country that had given birth to Dante's family, but experiencing it as tourists, not criminals. Seeing art, eating incredible food, making memories that had nothing to do with violence or power plays. On their last night in Rome, sitting at a cafe watching the sunset, Alexis asked a question she'd been holding on to. "Do you miss it? The power? The fear? The respect that came from being Carlo Russo's grandson?" Dante considered carefully. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity. Problems were solved directly, decisions were made quickly. But I don't miss the paranoia, the constant violence, the knowing that any day could be your last." He took her hand. "What I have now is better. Harder earned, but better. What do we have now? Everything. An empire built on intelligence instead of intimidation. Respect earned through success instead of fear. And you. Someone who chose me for who I am, not what I could do for them." He kissed her hand. "I'm the richest man in the world, and it has nothing to do with money." They returned to New York ready to start the next chapter. Chen Enterprises was thriving. Their investment portfolio was outperforming the market. And they just announced a new initiative, a fund to help children of former criminals get education and legitimate career opportunities. "Breaking the cycle," the announcement read. "Proving that where you come from doesn't determine where you go." 6 months after the wedding, Alexis discovered she was pregnant. The news terrified both of them, bringing a child into a world where Dante's past still lurked in shadows, where enemies might see the baby as a target. "We'll protect them," Dante said, his hand on her still flat stomach, "with every resource we have. And we'll raise them to be better than both of us. Smart like you, determined like me, but without the baggage we carried. What if they inherit your grandfather's tendencies? What if... Then we'll teach them that those tendencies can be channeled into legitimate success. Ambition isn't bad. Ruthlessness in business isn't wrong. It's using violence to achieve goals that corrupts." He pulled her close. "Our child will have choices we never did. That's the gift we're giving them." Their daughter, Elena, was born on a crisp October morning. She had Dante's dark hair and Alexis's intelligent eyes, and from her first breath, she had both of them wrapped around her tiny finger. "She's perfect," Dante whispered, holding her for the first time. "How did we make something this perfect?" "By being imperfect together," Alexis replied. "By choosing each other despite every reason not to. By building something real." Chapter 9. Full Circle. 5 years after Elena was born, Chen Enterprises was recognized as one of the most successful investment firms in the country. But more than that, they were known for their ethics, their charitable giving, and their commitment to legitimate business practices. Dante was invited to speak at a business school, sharing his story of transitioning from criminal legacy to legitimate success. Alexis sat in the audience, watching her husband inspire a room full of future business leaders. "My grandfather built an empire on fear," Dante told the students. "It made him powerful, but it also made him paranoid, isolated, and ultimately, it got him killed. I chose a different path. I built my empire on intelligence, strategy, and yes, some ruthlessness, but the legal kind." "The competitive, capitalist kind," a student raised her hand. "But didn't you benefit from your grandfather's illegal money? Isn't that giving you an unfair advantage?" "Absolutely. I started with resources most people don't have. But here's what I learned. Having money is easy. Building something that lasts, something you're proud of, something that doesn't require looking over your shoulder. That's hard. That requires actually being good at what you do, not just being scary. He gestured to Alexis. And it requires surrounding yourself with people who are smarter than you in their areas of expertise and listening to them. After the speech, a young man approached. He was nervous, clearly working up courage. Mr. Russo? My father worked for your grandfather. He's in prison now for the rest of his life. I just wanted to say thank you for proving there's another way, for showing people like me that we don't have to follow our parents' paths. Dante shook his hand. What's your name? Tommy Moretti. Moretti? Dante exchanged a glance with Alexis, the family that had once been rivals. What are you studying? Finance. Hoping to work in legitimate investment someday. Come by my office next week. We have an internship program for exactly this situation. No promises, but if you're willing to work hard and prove yourself, we'll give you a chance. On the drive home, Alexis squeezed Dante's hand. You're giving that kid an opportunity you never had. I'm breaking the cycle. That's what this was all about, wasn't it? Proving that blood doesn't determine destiny? You've proven it 1,000 times over. That night, after putting Elena to bed, they stood on the terrace of their penthouse, looking out at the city Dante had once controlled through fear and now influenced through legitimate success. Do you think Elena will understand someday? Alexis asked. About your past? About where her family came from? We'll tell her the truth when she's old enough. That her grandfather was a criminal, but her father chose to be something different. That we don't have to be what we're born into. He wrapped his arms around her. And we'll teach her that the best revenge against a terrible legacy is living well and building something good. Best revenge, Alexis repeated with a smile. Very Mafia of you. I can take the boy out of the mob, but I can't take all the mob out of the boy. He kissed her. But you got the important parts. The parts that matter. I got all of you. That's what matters. 10 years after they met, Dante and Alexis had everything they'd worked for. A legitimate empire worth billions, a family, respect earned through success rather than fear, and most importantly, they had each other. Two people who'd taken enormous risks and built something neither could have created alone. The Billionaire romance audiobook ending everyone hopes for, but with the complexity that made it real. Epilogue. 20 years later, Elena Russo Chen graduated from Harvard Business School at the top of her class. At her graduation party, she stood to give a speech, looking at her parents with love and pride. My father always told me that where you come from doesn't determine where you go. He proved it by transforming from the heir to a crime family into a legitimate billionaire who built one of the most successful investment firms in the country. My mother proved it by taking a risk on someone everyone told her was dangerous, and together they built an empire. She paused, emotional. They taught me that intelligence beats violence, that strategy beats intimidation, and that the best legacy you can leave is showing others that change is possible. I'm honored to announce that I'll be joining Russo Chen Enterprises, not because of nepotism, but because I've earned my place, and I'm ready to help build the next chapter of our family's story. Later, at home, Dante held Alexis close as they watched videos from the party. We did it, he said softly. We broke the cycle completely. Elena has no idea what my grandfather's world was really like. She only knows the legitimate one we built. That was always the goal. Alexis looked up at him. You know what's funny? When I first walked into your office all those years ago, I was terrified, certain you were going to drag me into something illegal and dangerous. And instead, you dragged me into something legal and beautiful. You showed me what real power looks like, not intimidation, but intelligence. Not fear, but respect. Not taking from others, but building something that helps everyone. Dante kissed her forehead. I couldn't have done any of it without you. You believed in me when you had every reason not to. You saw who I could be instead of who I'd been. I saw who you already were. You just needed someone to help you see it too. They stood together, looking out at the city they'd conquered, not with violence, but with vision. The empire they'd built wasn't measured just in dollars, but in lives changed, opportunities created, and cycles broken. Do you think grandfather would approve? Dante asked quietly. No. And that's how you know you succeeded. Alexis smiled. You became everything he wasn't. Better. Kinder. more successful in the ways that actually matter. You won, Dante. Not the way he would have, but in the way that actually lasts. We won. Together. Always together. As the sun set over Manhattan, casting golden light over the empire they'd built, Dante and Alexis held each other close. 20 years ago, she'd walked into his office expecting danger. What she'd found instead was partnership, love, and proof that even the darkest legacies could be transformed into something bright. The Mafia billionaire, and the analyst who believed in him. The man who left crime behind, and the woman who helped him build something legitimate. Two people who took enormous risks and created something that would last for generations. It was the perfect ending to their story. But more importantly, it was just the beginning of the legacy they'd leave behind. Thank you for listening to Blood and Billions, a Billionaire romance audiobooks full-length story. If you enjoyed this tale of a man who transformed his criminal legacy into legitimate success and found love along the way, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Leave a comment telling me, would you have taken the job with Dante? Would you have stayed after finding the laundered transaction? And do you think it's possible to truly escape a criminal past? Until next time, remember, where you come from doesn't determine where you're going. Your choices, your determination, and the people you choose to build with. That's what creates your legacy. Hashtag Billionaire Romance Audiobooks full length. Hashtag Mafia Billionaire Romance. Hashtag Dark Romance. Hashtag Enemies to Lovers. Hashtag Forced Proximity. Hashtag Redemption Arc. This has been Dark Tales. Sleep well, and dream of empires built on intelligence, not intimidation.